We have to stop wars. We have to stop this war, and we have to get out of the habit of war. It's more than a habit, it's an addiction. We have to get out of thinking that we must be a military superpower. We must get out of thinking that we must have military bases as we have in 100 countries. Is it possible that having military bases in 100 countries arouses a lot of antagonism? Is it possible that it provokes terrorism when your soldiers and your sails are all over the world, occupying this country and occupying, is it possible? Why do we have to be a military superpower? Why can't it be a humanitarian superpower? Instead of sending planes to bomb, why don't we send planes with food, medicine?
Oh shit, look, it's one of the machines. Looks like it's trapped under something, it's broken or something.
Let's get out of here, we cannot stay.
Hold on a second, let me get my keyboard. I can reprogram this thing.
Does not matter, leave
No,
it.
seriously, I can do it. Just give me a second.
Unsuccessful.
One more time.
What is taking so long?
No, I swear to God, I can do this, man. I can do this.
Enemy. I kill Zero.
Reprogramming. Unsuccessful.
Enemy. I kill Zero.
Cross your
Enemy.
fingers.
Reprogramming. Unsuccessful.
Not going to work.
Enemy.
Maybe this will work.
I kill Zero.
You have to work.
Enemy. I kill Zero.
All right, this is the last time.
Enemy.
Reprogramming. Successful.
Yes!
All right, how's everybody doing this evening? Tonight on We've Read the Documents, we are going to cover a basic narrative on the Council for National Policy so that we can begin to lay the groundwork on the organization in and of itself. And we are going to read from a basic narrative from seekGod.ca that used to do a lot of research on the Council for National Policy. We're also going to look at newspaper articles that I found from 1981, which was when the Council for National Policy was started, through 1984, as well as a CIA document that I've discovered that you guys might find interesting. That was from Woody Jenkins, who I believe was a Louisiana state representative, to one William J. Casey, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, asking him to join a Council for National Policy meeting. So, why don't we begin with the document from seekGod.ca, which of course this website is now gone. It's been taken down over the past couple of years. But even though it has been taken down this past couple of years, it's still very important with the information that is involved with the Council for National Policy. And let me guys know if the audio is a little bit better. I turned it up a little bit, make sure it sounds good. Maybe just bring it up a little bit closer to me since when I start reading everything. But yeah, when we talk about the Council for National Policy and we talk about what is involved with it, it's very good to get an idea of a basic narrative of what is involved with the CNP. So let's go ahead. In a sense, the CNP has become the worst kept secret. According to Group Watch, due to the past secrecy involving around the CNP, there are conflicting reports about the CNP's history and founding principles. Okay. Principles. The 1982 and 1983 officers of the Council for National Policy were Thomas F. Ellis, President Nelson Bunker Hunt, Vice President Bob J. Perry, Secretary of Treasury Representative Louis Woody Jenkins, Executive Director, and Dr. Tim LaHaye, a medium press president. According to Nelson Bunker Hunt in his deposition in the Iran-Contra hearings, the presidency of the Council for National Policy rotates. He has been president. Pat Robertson has been president. And the president at the time of the hearings was Richard DeVos. Hunt also noticed that right-wing stalwarts Joseph Coors, Paul Weyrich, and Howard Phillips had served on the executive committee. Woody Jenkins was also the original executive director who resigned when the CNP moved from Louisiana to Washington, D.C. According to the Hunt deposition, Jenkins was succeeded by Margot Carlisle and then Jack Nelson. The CNP has no members who are not principals. It is a gathering of millionaires that covers a full spectrum of the political right. The New Right, neoconservatives, members of President Reagan's kitchen cabinet, and fundamentalist preachers and televangelists. Background. According to one source, the Council for National Policy was formed in 1981 by Texas millionaires Nelson Bunker Hunt, Herbert Hunt, and T. Cullen Davis. A second source reports that it was formed by Richard Vergary to rival the Council on Foreign Relations. The council is comprised of political, powerful, wealthy individuals and intentionally maintains a very low profile. One of the conditions of membership is not to reveal the names of other members or the substance of the group's meetings. The CNP builds itself as being the Council on Foreign Policy for the right. But its importance does not lie in producing and promoting an ultra-conservative foreign policy agenda. Many of its affiliates already do that. It is considered by its members as a network that encompasses the entire spectrum of right-wing politics. It provides a quote-unquote safe place for representatives for a wide range of ultra-conservative, anti-communist, pro-military organizations, including the executive branch of the White House, to discuss and promote their programs. In 1986, it claimed to operate on a budget of $450,000 used for operational and educational activities. At the meetings, talks are given by government officials or key figures in the current United States foreign policy endeavors. Adolfo Calero attended several meetings and spoke to the group about Nicaraguan Contra situation in 1984. Colonel Oliver North, advisor to the National Security Council and a key figure in the Iran-Contra affair, spoke to the group several times before joining it as a member. The meetings are closed and attendees rarely speak publicly about the proceedings. The agenda of a meeting at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs in 1982 was filled with CNP members talking to the already committed about their favorite topics. Phyllis Schlafly on traditional values, Major General John K. Singlaw, who was originally in the OSS and one of the founding members of the CIA, on special operations in El Salvador, and General Alvon Knight on national defense and so on. The list of speakers include most of the major figures of the right, including Philip Truelock of the Heritage Foundation, Howard Phillips of the Conservative Caucus, beer baron Joseph Coors, conservative columnist Patrick Buchanan, Frank Shakespeare, chairman of Heritage Foundation Direct Mail Richard Vergary, Jerry Falwell of the Moral Majority, the president of the Amway Corporation Richard DeVos, Neil Blair, president of Free the Eagle, John Terry Dolan, chairman of the National Conservative Political Action Committee, Gene Kirkpatrick, U.S. delegate to the United Nations, and from the Christian Broadcasting Network, evangelicus Pat Robertson. Okay? So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today as far as the time span. We'll read more from the Seek God website as we come across. So the first article that I can come across about the Council for National Policy was from the Atlanta Constitution in 1981. And this is from the New York Times. 50 conservative activists form new policy think tank. More than 50 well-known conservatives have convened the Council for National Policy. A new group they hope will gain influence, much as they believe liberals have through such organizations as the Council on Foreign Relations. Louis Woody Jenkins, the group's executive director and twice a losing Senate candidate in Louisiana, said the meeting had concentrated on individual statements of personal and national goals and on such subjects as how conservatives could best influence such matters as judicial appointments. Richard Vergary, the direct mail entrepreneur who works with a variety of conservative causes and candidates, said, "We never had up to now any kind of broad, all-inclusive organization of conservatives. Thinking people. People have had a lot of leverage." He said that this group would fill that gap. Monday night, at Vergary's home in McLean, Virginia, the group honored David A. Stockman, director of the Office of Management and Budget, for his efforts to cut the budget. Howard Phillips, head of the Conservative Caucus, presented Stockman with the group's Thomas Jefferson Award, saying, quote-unquote, the leadership of President Reagan has given us an unprecedented opportunity to turn around much of the harm that has been done in recent years. Without Stockman, he said, quote-unquote, the prospects for defunding the left simply wouldn't be there. The president of the council is Tim LaHaye. Of course, as an aside, he is the author of the Left Behind series, who is also president of Family Life Seminars of El Cajun, California. LBRY and Phillips are members of the council's executive committee, along with Paul Ryrick, head of the Committee for the Survival of a Free Congress. Among the members of the council are Morton C. Blackwell, Special Assistant to President Reagan for Public Liaison, Robert Billings, a former leader of the Moral Majority who is now an aide at the Department of Education, Joseph Coors, head of brewery and donator to many conservative causes, and Senator John P. East, Republican of North Carolina. Other members include Ed Fulner, head of the Heritage Foundation, Nellie Gray, head of the March for Life, an anti-abortion group, Herbert and Nelson Bunker Hunt of the Hunt Energy Company, Reed Larson of the National Right to Work Committee, Ed McTeer, president of the Religious Roundtable, Bill Sarkino of Gun Owners of America, and Phyllis Schlafly of Stop ERA. So yeah, as Epic Journeyman had mentioned earlier in the chat, the Hunt brothers did try to corner the silver market, and when that later occurred, they ended up being brought to court by the United States government and ended up supposedly losing a lot of money out of that. Josh Reeves covered that in his movie The Secret Right, Volume 1. But it's still very interesting about the Hunts and how they were also a big part of the John Birch Society, which is still today, but it was still a precursor organization to the Council for National Policy. Here is one of the earliest membership lists that we have of the Council for National Policy. This is from the American Farm Bureau. Organization notes from February 26, 1982. The Los Angeles dinner of the John Birch Society will be addressed this year by Nelson Bunker Hunt, the Texas millionaire who is a member of the group's National Council and chief fundraiser for the Campus Crusade for Christ and its Christian Embassy. Liberty Lobby has begun this decade with a substantial increase both in scope and in venom of its anti-Semitism and extremist propaganda, according to a report by the Anti-Defamation League of the B'nai B'rith. It stated that Liberty Lobby started in the 1980s with an annual income of almost $4 million, and it's called its founder, Willis Carto, quote-unquote, the mastermind of the hate network. Usually I hate to agree with the ADL, because, but still nonetheless, Bill Cooper had a distaste for the Liberty Lobby. Josh Reeves has a distaste for the Liberty Lobby, and I do as well. Willis Carto is a known white nationalist. So, the Americanism Educational League, an old-time super patriotic group in California, is raising money to expand and work on offering speakers such as United States Senators Jake Garn, Jeremiah Denton, and Steve Sims, retired General Daniel O. Graham, and former Treasury Secretary William Simon. So let's scroll down. It's pretty much just going over general information. But we do have the Board of Governors listing. Now, I'm not going to read everybody here, but there are a couple of people on here that I want to make note who are relatively famous that were in the CNP as of 1982. So we do have Pat Boone. Everybody knows him as a famous entertainer. The Coors family, Holly Coors and Joseph Coors. T. Cullen Davis. James Dobson, of course, focus on the family. Reverend Jerry Falwell, the Moral Majority. Edwin J. Fulner, one of the founders of the Heritage Foundation. Senator Jesse Helms from my great state of North Carolina. Herbert Hunt, and of course, Nelson Bunker Hunt. Representative Woody Jenkins. Brigadier General Albon W. Knight, United States Army retired. Tim LaHaye's wife, Beverly LaHaye, and Tim LaHaye as well. Congressman Larry P. McDonald, who would later be quote-unquote, assassinated by the USSR when they downed one of the Korean flights. Pardon my ignorance. I can't remember exactly what flight it was. Howard Phillips, head of the Conservative Caucus. Dr. Pat Robertson, Christian Broadcasting Network. Reverend R.J. Rushdoony. Phyllis Schlafly, the dame of the CNP and conservatism. Dr. W. Cleon Skousen of the Freeman Institute. W. Cleon Skousen was also one of the founding members of the John Birch Society, and is also the uncle to current-day conspiracy theorist who goes on the Alex Jones Show, and Jeff Rentz. Oh, what is his name? Joel Skousen. He is his uncle. Warren Robert Stoddard, who was a multimillionaire. Kathy Teague, American Legislation Exchange Council. She would eventually marry a Rothschild, and her name would become Catherine Teague Rothschild. Richard Vergary, Paul Weyrich. And if anybody else sees anybody on that list or has any information, let me know. Those are the main people that that I know from the list. Tom Ellis, too, attorney at law. He'd be very big in the Council for National Policy. But yes, those are some of the major players that I believe that were in the CNP at that time during 1982. So, what kind of influence does the CNP have? You know, everybody says, well, we've heard the CFR, John. Alex Jones has never told us about the CNP. So what type of influence did the CNP have during the early 80s? Taiwan premier urged to argue cause in the United States. Hong Kong, Associated Press. A leading American conservative said on Friday he plans to invite Taiwanese Premier Sun Yat-sen to the United States to personalize his cause against China and improve Taiwan's image abroad. Howard Phillips, national chairman of the Conservative Caucus, says he intends to organize a nationwide speaking tour for Taiwanese officials to arouse, quote-unquote, the sense of fair play of the American people. Phillips is leading a group from the Louisiana-based Council for National Policy to Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Japan. Let me read that again for anybody who has a little bit of trouble hearing. Phillips is leading a group from the Louisiana-based Council for National Policy to Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Japan. So they are holding a lot to do with foreign policy at that time. He and his group were in Taipei when Washington and Peking announced their agreement calling for limited future U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. Phillips said the pact not only violates President Reagan's campaign promises, but also will damage the coalition between Reagan and the conservatives. Okay, here is a brief article from the 1982 Town Talk. Reagan to name 3 positions. President Ronald Reagan, and this happened during when I read the American Farm Bureau article later. President Reagan intends to name 3 persons, including American Farm Bureau President Robert Delano, and to the Advisory Committee on Trade Negotiations, the White House announced Monday. Delano also resides in Warsaw, Virginia, and is being reappointed to the committee, along with Lloyd Hackler of Kearneysville, West Virginia, president of the American Retail Federation. Reagan will also appoint Woody Jenkins of Baton Rouge, executive director of the Council for National Policy, to succeed Elpeth Rostow, the White House said. So, who is Elspeth Rostow? She was a female who was a dean of the LBRY School of Public Affairs and graduated with a master's degree from Cambridge University. But I can't really see what she did for Reagan. Oh, among her other presidential appointments, President Ronald Reagan appointed her to the board of the U.S. Institute of Peace, which she later chaired. So apparently, Woody Jenkins took over her position at the United States. That doesn't make any sense either. The United States Institute of Peace supposedly wasn't established in 1984. So I have no idea what she was doing for the Reagan administration at that time. Interesting. If anybody in the comments has an idea, let me know. That's interesting. I'm gonna do some more further research on that to see if I can get an answer. All right, 1984, West Palm Beach, and it's funny because back in the day they used to publish the locations in the local newspaper in time when a CNP meeting would happen if you just got lucky. I haven't found any recently in the past 10 years or so of that occurring, but actually you can find a lot in the 1980s when you're looking of them saying, today at West Palm Beach, the CNP is going to be at this such and such hotel for this meeting and stuff, which is very interesting. They don't really give that information out very, very much anymore. New Right Leaders Bringing an Annual Convention to Palm Beach by Tony Wharton. Don't be surprised if you hear the sound of trumpets coming from Palm Beach in a couple of weeks. The Council for National Policy, a fife and drum corps of the New Right, is convening its annual convention at the Breakers, and if pollsters' estimates of Ronald Reagan's chances are accurate, its members will have something to celebrate. This should be one of the most exciting meetings in the history of the Council for National Policy, the group's executive director, Woody Jenkins, a Louisiana state legislator, confidently wrote the members in October. No wonder, in the 30 years since the group's formation, right-wing leaders have exchanged success stories that grew brighter at every annual summit meeting as political links reached the White House. Consider some of the conservative moneymen and lobbyists expected to attend: the Reverend Jerry Falwell, oil billionaire Nelson Bunker Hunt, a co-founder, San Diego preacher Tim LaHaye, a high priest of the New Right who is also a founder, anti-equal rights amendment crusader Phyllis Schlafly, and national conservative activist John Terry Dolan. Other past members or associates of the group who might be expected are Brewmaster Joseph Corrs, United States, and Senator Jesse Helms, Republican of North Carolina, Texas millionaire T. Colin Davis, lobbyist Richard Vergary, and Department of Education official Bob Billings, a former executive director of the Moral Majority. The meeting's theme is quote-unquote goal setting for the year 2000, but some members insist that the name is misleading. They don't form policy if that's what you're thinking, Ms. Schlafly said. Reed Larson, president of the National Right to Work Committee, said, it doesn't seek any publicity and doesn't take any public policy positions. Yeah, the next stream when we go over the Rand-Contra affair and the CNP's involvement, yeah, there's a load of horse crap. Jenkins' letter from the offices in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, said otherwise. Quote-unquote, this should provide each of us on the board an outstanding opportunity to reach a consensus about the direction we would like to lead our nation and the world, he said. The council operates as secretly as possible. Members are instructed not to talk to the media or anyone else about its functions, and all those contacted for the story adhered to the rule. But in the ear to the door of the Breakers meeting rooms probably would hear discussions of the biggest items on the nation's social agenda: defense, abortion, tax reform, social programs, the Equal Rights Amendment, and prayer in the schools among them, and the future of conservative movement in North America. Probably a good indication of the group's members' priorities is the platform of the Populist Conservative Tax Coalition, a newly formed right-wing group that shares 8 members with the council, including the coalition's top officials, Vergary and conservative caucus leader Howard Phillips. A tax coalition's platform contains most of the major conservative planks: military superiority over the Soviet Union, the right to bear arms reducing the size of the federal government, welfare reform, and supplying arms to foreign freedom fighters. Oh, I wonder who those quote-unquote foreign freedom fighters were. Were they freaking death squads down in Latin America? Was it the Contras in Nicaragua? I wonder whom. It also supports slightly more exotic proposals, which giving aid to arms of freedom fighters isn't enough, such as a flat tax rate, 10% income tax, the high frontier, often quote-unquote Star Wars space defense system, a guarantee of Taiwan's independence, yep, we read about that earlier, a return to the gold standard for the dollar, and a sale of the federal wilderness areas to conservatism groups at $1 an acre in place of national parks. LaHaye started the council by calling Davis, the Texan millionaire, acquitted of murder and murder conspiracy charges. Yes, that is true. T. Colin Davis was acquitted of the murder of, I believe, his stepdaughter. Davis, in turn, I want to make sure it's a stepdaughter. I think it's a stepdaughter. Yes, his stepdaughter. Davis in turn called Hunt the billionaire who tried to corner the world's silver market, which is what Epic Journeyman mentioned earlier, once upon a time. Hunt is now vice president of the council. LaHaye's role in the council has waned as he took on another task, making sure the people who pass the collection plate in church don't pass the ballot box on Tuesday. The American Coalition of Traditional Values under LaHaye's leadership met with Reagan in June and has vowed to sign up 2 million Christian voters for this election. This, quote-unquote, the significant thing about Tim... I forgot to get the rest of the... Did I forget to get the rest of the... Oh, I didn't, okay. The significant amount of Tim LaHaye... thing about Tim LaHaye was that he was tapped by the administration to keep the right-wing religious groups in line and get the vote out, said Christine Jacobs, editor of the Interchange Report, a Washington, D.C. publication. Phillips and Vulgari with the Tax Coalition are taking extreme right-wing politics against unions, pornography, and dente for a balanced budget and a much smaller federal government, and calling it populism. Vulgari wrote 9 years ago, I understand marketing, and I don't believe that in my lifetime you will ever be able to successfully to market the word Republican. With those concerns in the minds of council members, a strong theme of the convention probably will be serving the members' values and policy suggestions to the White House and the voters in a palatable fashion. Yeah, Epic, you mentioned that San Diego and California is a big CNP hub. Yeah, very much so. I 100% agree with you on that. That is one of their West Coast hubs from my research anyway. So, now we're going to move on to tonight's special document. I don't think anybody's ever really reported on this. Interesting enough, it just takes a simple archive search and it shows up. The CIA shared this themselves to us. So, memorandum for the Director of Central Intelligence, who was William Casey at the time, William J. Casey. From George V. Lauder, Director of the Public Affairs Office. Subject, invitations to address the Council for National Policy. This is January 7th, 1985. 1. Background. Executive Director of the Council for National Policy, Louis Woody Jenkins, a Reagan appointee to the Advisory Committee for Trade Negotiations, has invited you to address the Board of Governors of the Council at their next meeting at the Marriott's Rancho Las Palmas Resort in Rancho Mirage, California, Friday and Saturday, February 22 through 23rd. Mrs. Casey has been invited to accompany you. Council meetings are closed to the meeting and to the general public. The Council for National Policy is a conservative, non-profit, tax-exempt educational foundation comprised of corporate, government, and religious leaders who share a belief in the free enterprise system, the need for a strong national defense, and a desire for a moral rebirth in America, bringing together men and women who can influence the direction of our country in the course of history is the Council's goal. Members of the board are chairman of the Energy Corporation Bunker Hunt, President of Aldorf Coors Company Joseph Coors, President of RKO General Frank Shakespeare, New York Congressman Jack Kemp, and Alabama Senator Jeremiah Denton, to name a few. See attachment for further information. According to Newsweek, the Council for National Policy is, quote-unquote, an information coalition of new right activists that are for the first time puts well-heeled conservative like billionaire Bunker Hunt and fundamentalist preacher in regular touch with right-wing political tacticians, U.S. senators, and White House officials. 2. Recommendation. You may be interested in getting the word out to this influential group of conservatives if spending a weekend in California works with your schedule. Please indicate your preference and my staff will make any arrangements or regrets. So let's get a little background on William J. Casey a little bit from Confessions of a D.C. Madam by Henry W. Vincent. If you want further background on Vincent, listen to the episode of Dudes Talking, episode 5 that I did on Franklin with George Cleese. Let's see here. I felt a potential risk to my life with CIA Director William Casey, patronage of my escort service. The Washington Times reported that William Casey attended parties at Spence's house, and Casey and Spence were quote-unquote friends. But his reporters weren't aware that their relationship had a common denominator that entailed procuring gay escorts for me. William Casey started to phone me for gay escorts in 1986. Like Barney Frank, his preferred escort was an 18-year-old with minimal body hair and a slender swimmer's physique. Although he requested I provide him with underage escorts, I told him that I would not acquiesce to that request. Casey met with the escorts at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel when it was near DuPont Circle. After he was nude and splayed on the bed, he had the escorts rub over his body as he kissed and fondled them. Casey was old and withered, and the escorts didn't particularly savor the encounters with him. Casey came to my attention because he wasn't able to have an erection. And the escorts that I employed were perplexed by both his elaborate rituals with the oil and his erectile dysfunction. Casey died of cancer in May of 1987, so when the Washington Times started to break stories about Spence and my escort service, Casey had drifted to the hereafter. Nevertheless, I was worried that his CIA cronies would want to bury his secret dalliances with young men, even if it involved burying me. So yes, you heard it here first, folks. According to Henry W. Vincent, William Casey used to like 18-year-old male prostitutes he liked to cover his head in oil and rub his bald head all over their naked bodies. Council for National Policy, Office of the Executive Director, January 2nd, 1985, confidential. Honorable William J. Casey, Director, Central Intelligence Agency, Washington, D.C., 20505. Invitation to address Council for National Policy. Attend February 22nd to 23rd, 1985 meeting in California. Dear Mr. Casey, it is a pleasure for me to extend to you an invitation to address the Board of Governors of the Council for National Policy at our next meeting, which will be held February 22nd to the 23rd, 1985 at Rancho Las Palmas in Rancho Mirage, California. I very much hope you will accept this invitation. Our members will gain a great deal from the opportunity to meet you, hear your message, and spend time getting to know you. We hope you will bring your spouse so that both of you could take part in this event. I guess did the spouse know or did not know? Did Miss Casey know that her husband was a homosexual and loved to have 18-year-old, even asked for underage boys to rub oil and to fondle him and to molest them? Maybe not, but man, oh man, I tell you something. The Council for National Policy is a unique organization, and I believe you will find the meeting an interesting and fulfilling experience. The meeting is set at Marriott's Rancho Las Palmas Resort, which is one of the most beautiful and complete meeting and convention centers in California. We have scheduled the meeting so that you can spend free time with our members and enjoy the many facilities available. If you're able to speak to us, we will work with your staff on a mutually agreeable time, topic, and duration for your address. We would like to invite you and your spouse to be our guests for the entire meeting, which begins at 1:30 p.m. on Friday, February 22nd, and ends at 10 p.m. on Saturday, February 23rd. Naturally, we will provide your hotel accommodations and food at Rancho Las Palmas and transportation expenses. Purposes of the Council. The Council for National Policy is a nonprofit tax-exempt educational foundation organized in accordance with Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. The Council is composed of America's key national and regional leaders who share a belief in the free enterprise system, the need for a strong national defense, and a desire for a moral rebirth in America. It includes established leaders from all walks of life and all sections of the country, as well as young men and women who have potential to accomplish great things in the future. We do not support or oppose candidates, lobby for or against legislation, or make public statements on issues. Rather, our purpose is to make sure that these leaders have access to the best information available on national and world problems, know one another on a personal basis, and collaborate in achieving their shared goals. President Reagan said in a message to our last annual meeting, again, while he was president of these United States of America, people, quote unquote, few people have more power than the members of the Council for National Policy to influence the future course of our nation. For anybody who says that the CNP is not as strong as the CFR, like in the past that, what is his name? He was on Gramerica. I do like his work. I can hear he's on the Boiler Room. Jay Dyer said that the CFR is weaker to the CNP. And I would like to read this quote to you again if you ever listen to this, Jay. And for anybody out there listening that thinks that the CNP did not have power during the 1980s and does not have power now when we eventually get to how many members of the Trump administration are part or have a relationship with the CNP. President Reagan said in a message to our last annual meeting, quote unquote, few people have more power than the members of the Council for National Policy to influence the future course of our nation. Indeed, that is our goal, to bring together the men and women who can influence the direction of our country and the course of history. Members of Board of Governors. The Council for National Policy was formed in 1981 and now has 402 members as of 1985. We are gradually increasing our members. Members include Bunker Hunt, chairman of the Hunt Energy Corporation; Peter Grace, president of the WR Grace Company; Joseph Kouros, president of the Aldorf Coors Company; Richard DeVos, president of the Amway Corporation and co-chairman of Mutual Broadcasting System; Jack Eckerd, founder of the Jack Eckerd Corporation; Frank Shakespeare, president of Archeo General and chairman of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty; Dr. Pat Robertson, president of Christian Broadcasting Network; Ambassador Louis Tams, the current U.S. ambassador to Colombia; Russell Perry, chairman of Republic Financial Services Incorporated; Dr. James Dobson, president of Focus on the Family; Dr. Bert Servas, publisher of the Saturday Evening Post; Texas businessman Jimmy Lyon, who served as President Reagan's national finance chairman; William Rusher, publisher of National Review; Louis Lehrman, former chairman of Rite Aid Corporation, a chain of 1,500 drugstores, and recently the GOP nomination of governor for New York; Dr. Edwin J. Fulner, president of the Heritage Foundation; Dr. W. Cleon Skousen, president of the Freeman Institute; and Reed Larson, president of the 1.5 million member National Right to Work Committee. Also, Samuel Moore, president of the Thomas Nelson Publishers, one of the nation's largest book publishers; Dr. George C. Roosh III, president of Hillsdale College; Professor Hans Seeholz, chairman of the board of the Federation of the Economic Education; Lieutenant General Daniel O. Graham, U.S. Army retired, former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and current chairman of the High Frontier Project, which is, of course, known as Star Wars; Major General John K. Singlaub, U.S. Army retired, former Chief of Staff of U.S. Forces in Korea; Major General George S. Patton III, U.S. Army, and son of the famous World War II hero, of course, General Patton; Governor John H. Sununu, Republican governor of New Hampshire; President Reagan's former National Security Advisor, Richard V. Allen; Ambassador Faith Whittlesey, Assistant to the President for Public Liaison; numerous members of the United States Senate and House of Representatives, including Senator William Armstrong of Colorado; Senator Jim McClure, chairman of the Senate Energy Committee and chairman of the State Republican Conference; Senator Jeremiah Denton of Alabama, who was a president of war in North Vietnam for 7 years; Congressman Jack Kemp of New York, chairman of the House Republican Conference; Congressman Charles Stenholm, chairman of the House Conservative Democratic Forum, the Boll Weevils, and many other key leaders. Meetings. We meet 3 times a year, and each meeting features outstanding speakers on topics of great national concern. Council meetings are closed to the public and closed to the media and to the general public. We do not announce to the media when or where we meet, nor do we inform the media as to who takes part in our programs, either before or after a meeting. The remarks of the speaker at the council meetings are quote-unquote off the record and not for repetition outside of our meetings, except for with special permission. Similarly, our membership list is considered confidential and is not revealed to anyone outside the council. Participation in council activities is very high. In fact, attendance averages from 50 to 80%. All room reservations should be made through this office. The Council for National Policy guarantees room reservations at the head count for all meal functions. So kindly fill out the enclosed registration form and return it to this office by January 9th. This will help us predict the number of rooms and meals that we need to guarantee. And making reservations, please remember that only members of the Board of Governors and their spouses may attend board meetings. Others may attend only with special permission of the Executive Committee. This will be one of our best meetings, especially if you're able to pretend to participate. If I can provide any additional information about the council or the upcoming meeting, please do not hesitate to call me. Hope you can be with us at Rancho Las Palmas in February. I am sincerely Louis Woody Jenkins, Executive Director. And then, of course, the thing of whether or not. So I do believe that William Casey did not end up going to that meeting. So, I hope I've laid some groundwork of the Council for National Policy's early years from 1981 to the beginning of 1985. Our next stream on the CNP is going to cover the time period from 1985 to 1989 and their involvement in the Iran-Contra affair. The CNP was very, very strongly associated factor within the Reagan administration, and now currently through through the Bush administrations as well as the Trump administration currently. So that is why I wanted to lay this groundwork so people know that it was important at its inception, had many big names associated with it, and is now something big today, and has been big since its foundation in 1981. That's it for this evening, you guys. I hope you found it very informative. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Just a Guy, Mr. Jones, Epic Journeyman. Thank you all of you for joining me this evening as we went over the Council for National Policy. And so there's a lot, and next stream we're going to cover the late 80s as well as the Iran-Contra affair, and do another stream on the second part of the Steele dossier. Till next time, take care, everyone, and as always, read the documents. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
If you walk through the garden, you better watch your back. Well, I beg your pardon. Walk the straight and narrow track. You can walk with Jesus. He'll save your soul. You gotta keep the devil down in the hole. You got the fire and the fury at his command. You don't have to worry. You love it, Jesus says. You can walk with Jesus. He'll save your soul. You gotta keep the devil down in the hole.
And all the angels sing about Jesus' mighty sword, and they'll shield you with